Hey, I'm Jeremy, and I'm your troubleshooter today. Carmelita from Paris asks, I streamed a conference with vMix last weekend. While there, I was asked to display the feed to TVs in the room. Unfortunately, the delay between real time and the TVs was very distracting, so we scrapped the idea. But how do I do this next time? Well, Carmelita, buckle up, because you opened up a wormhole of testing and information. You attempted an IMAG workflow. IMAG is short for image magnification, and typically you see it in large venues where the cameras are giving a close-up view of the action to the audience on large LED screens or projectors. I'm going to dive into 3 ways to decrease IMAG latency. First, using a fast switcher. Second, increasing the frame rate. And third, reducing the number of steps in your signal flow. Before I go into depth, let me show you how we tested. I set up a Panasonic UE150 and pointed it towards an iPad running a stopwatch. I plugged the camera in directly to the switcher and switched the camera into the program feed. I then plugged the program feed directly into an Atomos Shogun with an SDI cable. We took pictures of the iPad right next to the Shogun, which just shows the iPad after it runs through the system. By calculating the differences between the 2 times, we get the glass-to-glass time, or system latency. To account for some margin of error with refresh rates and shutter speeds, we locked the shutter speed at 1/250 seconds and averaged out at least 3 photos per setup. With that out of the way, let's cover our first way to decrease IMAG latency. Use a fast hardware switcher. Let's start with an ATEM Constellation 8K as our baseline. The Shogun is displaying an image that is 160 milliseconds behind, which is about 5 frames behind real time in 1080 2997p. vMix does not fare as well. It's a software switcher, which is almost always slower. With default setting, the glass-to-glass time with 2997p is 350 milliseconds, or about 11 frames in real time. That's almost double the latency of the ATEM. Turning on low latency capture in the setting helps reduce this to 200 milliseconds, which is closer to just 7 frames behind. But this does require a higher-end graphics card and more video RAM. While this is just one hardware switcher and one software switcher to compare, it matches anecdotal and field experience from me, other producers, and technicians around the industry. Number 2, increase your frame rate. Faster frame rates have shorter frames. A 2997 FPS image, or a 30 FPS image, creates a new frame every 33 milliseconds, while 5994p, or 60p, only takes 16.5 milliseconds per frame. This adds up because frame latency is usually a constant in a system. For example, we found that the ATEM was at least 5 frames behind time, regardless of frame rate. So, at 5994p on an ATEM, the latency is now only 90 milliseconds. That's considerably faster than 2997p was at 160 milliseconds. It also looks better, in my opinion, since IMAG is supposed to look lifelike, and the 60p look really brings that out. 2398p, or 24p on the other hand, might look film-like when recorded, but on IMAG it is slow and unrealistic looking. The ATEM at 2398 took 270 milliseconds, and that's still only 6 frames behind real time like the others, but the frames at 2398 take way longer, so it adds up quickly. In addition, a lot of video engineering equipment needs to run at a division of 50 or 60 FPS, so I think that extra frame of delay was a conversion inside the camera to get it out of the SDI port. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, the moral of the story is to expect slow IMAG when running anything at a film frame rate like 2398 or 24p. Before we leave this point, a quick tip that can help you. If you're running a software switcher like vMix on site and the client surprises you with IMAG, try switching to 5994p if you can live with that 60p look. vMix at 5994 was actually acceptable at around 150 milliseconds behind real time, and turning on low latency capture surprisingly didn't make a difference. While 150 milliseconds is almost double what the ATEM does at the same 5994p frame rate, it's actually the same as the ATEM running at 2997p. Yeah, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but it's useful for you if you need to pull off IMAG in a pinch. Okay, the third and final, and probably most obvious way to decrease IMAG latency is to decrease the number of steps in your signal flow. Try to get the most direct line to the display as possible. In this test, I added 3 Blackmagic up-down cross converters into the signal flow. Using an ATEM at 2997p as the default, 140 milliseconds turned into 280 milliseconds, so it doubled. And while it didn't always double, it always added at least 2 frames per converter at any frame rate. You can imagine that this would be pretty catastrophic at 2398p, where we are now over 400 milliseconds behind real time, and those converters mimic other devices. But adding devices isn't always a deal breaker. For example, I added 3 Blackmagic distribution amplifiers online and saw basically no increase. But the point is, keep your signal flow short and you'll be in better shape. Carmelita, I hope this helped. This video took a bunch of testing, so we'd appreciate a like and a subscribe to prove that it was worth it. Do you have any live production problems you want us to troubleshoot? Comment below. Videos are welcome and encouraged. We'll recreate the problem and show you how to fix it. See you then.